Hello and welcome once again to Civil Engineering Today. I'm Ana Cristina.
And I'm Brockman.
And today's show is very special. As everyone is aware, this is the 12th anniversary of the 9/11 event. And as civil engineers and other types of engineers, we work very closely with the government on certain times. And it brings to mind a very specific issue. And we have with us as our guest the Executive Director of the American Council of Engineering Companies, ACEC, Abbie Goodman. Welcome, Abbie.
Thank you.
She's been on the show before, but she's going to bring to light an issue we're facing that we didn't even really know until 9/11 was an issue. So Abbie, can you tell us basically what is this issue?
The issue is what happens in the event of an emergency or a catastrophe. Are engineers able to go and provide free assistance to public officials to help with emergency management? And right now in Massachusetts, we don't have what is called Good Samaritan protection. And so we have legislation pending that would provide that protection to engineers and other professionals.
So when we say engineers, we mean both, engineers, architects, contractors, and their companies as well?
Which ones do we mean? It's a broad definition that applies to engineers, architects, landscape architects, licensed site professionals, land surveyors, contractors, and related professionals, and essentially provides protection for their firms because the firms are the ones carrying professional liability insurance.
Like I said, this is very fortuitous timing that it is the anniversary of 9/11, but we have to remember disasters can also include the natural disasters, as you said, and that's important, I think, when there's sudden flooding and whatnot. But aside from maybe case studies that you can mention that occurred directly from 9/11, what sort of examples do you have, things that have occurred that make this something that should be looked at?
Oh, certainly I can. To go back a couple of years, we were hit by several hurricanes and some tornadoes in central Massachusetts. Hurricane Irene, some other storms we can't name, plus more recently, Hurricane Sandy hitting part of Massachusetts, but also New York, New Jersey, and Superstorm Nemo. After Irene and some of the tornadoes, we were contacted by the Mass Municipal Association and by some of the municipal officials in the western part of the state where there had been significant damage of homes. FEMA and MEMA worked together to provide the immediate basic needs and assessments, but there were senior citizens who were concerned that their homes were damaged and that they could not return home after the storm. So they contacted us looking for structural engineers in that particular case who could come out and do pro bono or free site assessments so they could determine if they could safely live in their homes. When we reached out to firms came back to us and said, we'd like to do this, we'd like to help, but unfortunately our professional liability insurance doesn't cover us. If we're wrong, in our assessment, we could be subject to a suit.
And I think it's important to remember when we're making the assessment, we're making it based on experience more so than analysis. You just don't have the time to do it, especially in a flood. I mean,
in a flood situation or an emergency situation, earthquakes, we're in an earthquake-prone area, there are a number of cases. But where this really came to light is after 9/11. After 9/11, at the World Trade Center site, destruction with the Twin Towers down, a lot of efforts immediately for rescue and then recovery. Some of the engineering firms based here or based in New York sent on a voluntary basis, answered a call to send help to the scene to help with assessments so that first responders, police and fire, could determine whether they could safely go into the site, start pulling debris out of there, and basically try to help out with the situation. The engineering firms went down. They had respirators, they had respirator training. They tried and indicated to others that they needed to put respirators on. But they were structural engineers. They were not industrial hygiene experts. They were at a crucial time at the World Trade Center site, and we were all stunned. I mean, just thinking back to that period 12 years ago, we were all stunned by what had happened and didn't know if something else was going to happen after that horrible day. So subsequently, some of the other people on the sites at that time, particularly at the World Trade Center, turned around and filed suit against the engineering firms. And it's taken years to get those suits settled. And firms found that the professional liability insurance could not provide adequate coverage because it was a free service, not something planned in advance where you did the proper
Right.
analysis
There's no
of what the risk,
assessments,
no
and-
risk assessment in advance. And firms had to settle cases. And I think in some cases, the cases are still pending.
I know recently we just had our own little catastrophe here with the Boston bombing. And honestly, that's what really brought this to light for me. I wasn't even aware that, I mean, I hate to say that it seems unfortunate that people would go back and sue the company to begin with. I mean, it just seems odd to me. You're doing a service, and I know that we were asked to also sign up immediately after the bombings.
Actually, we did. I mean,
Yeah, we
and
did.
people
I
came out
signed
in
up.
droves. There wasn't maybe, the actual request maybe didn't always
It went to several
happen, but
certain
it was the
people.
right. I loved what I saw, and that's another thing that I see is there is a group in Massachusetts of engineers and architects banded together.
And that are willing to do this.
And,
Right.
and,
Now
and
we
they're
are
actually
finding out
they're actually
where-
having a training this Friday and Saturday, and they've been preparing. Rhode Island already has their act together. California has it so that there are volunteer groups that can be pulled together.
And who is
and come
covering
out.
these groups?
Well, insurance. Well, that's part of the thing. Other states, you'd know more than I do, but other states do have laws in place
Are we the only
for
Good
Good
Samaritan
Samaritan.
profession, or that is not
no.
covered? or-
Well,
No.
in terms of coverage, let me just look at my fact sheet because I don't remember all the states off the top of my head. Right now, the states that currently have Good Samaritan statutes that protect professional engineers and may also protect other types of professionals are California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Michigan, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oregon, Virginia, and Washington. So they all have some kind of protection in place. Other states are looking at potential legislation, and we filed it this session. We filed the bill in January. We started working on it last year, and really expedited our effort after Hurricane Sandy, because it became even more apparent that we needed to look at the direct results of climate change and what that was doing to us. And the first hearing on the bill will actually be before the Joint Committee on Judiciary, at this point scheduled for October 9th. So we're gearing our effort to prepare for that.
This is the first time it's really being presented.
It's the first public hearing before any legislative committee. Now, we've already had behind-the-scenes meetings with staffers at the Joint Committee on Judiciary, but this one particular committee that has this one particular bill sees several thousand bills every legislative
Yeah.
So
session.
who's really sponsoring? Who's helping us out?
Our key legislative sponsor is State Senator Karen Spilka. And then we have a number of other legislators in both the House and the Senate who are sponsors, including people from the Cape and from the Berkshires and from the middle of the state, where they've all faced their share of situations where it could be very helpful to have this kind of secondary response. I also want to go back to the Boston Marathon bombing situation. After the bombs went off, and as the FBI came in with the Boston Police Department to investigate the site, calls started to go out to engineering firms saying, we need to make sure that the buildings where the bombs went off nearby are safe so that the investigators can go in and gather evidence. So we know that a number of our firms got calls immediately. And if they had existing contracts with developers who owned those buildings, then they could go right in. But in some cases, firms said no, because they felt, although they felt awful about doing it, they knew they couldn't take a chance and just rush right in to do a site assessment and risk that somebody could get hurt at the site. They didn't have time, again, to do the risk analysis, and they knew they didn't have that kind of coverage. At the same time, the MBTA put out a call to about 5 engineering firms to see if they could reopen the Green Line.
Right.
And they went with the first firm they could get. Now, in that case, they had a firm under contract. So that firm had the right kind of protection in place. But when you have an emergency, they've got to be able to respond. The other thing that happened after the Boston Marathon that was interesting is we learned that first responders who were off duty, emergency EMTs and others who were off duty, also did not have Good Samaritan coverage,
Really?
which
Right.
was
I
shocking.
thought first,
Now,
I
that,
thought
right,
any
that's the
medical
part that's shocking,
personnel
and
did.
there's a connection here. There's,
know this.
that bill is also halfway through, right?
The bill has passed in one chamber. Our bill is separate,
Right.
separate path, and
If they're off duty, they can go after their companies?
if they're off duty, they could be personally liable.
Personally liable.
Oh, that's even better.
Okay. Now, I don't know that anybody is going to want to go after individual people, but you never know what somebody's financial circumstances are and what the motivations might be. So they didn't want to have those people be personally liable.
Well, there's always an element. There's people who try to, take some of the money from the one fund that don't.
That's horrifying too, yes.
So, on top of this legislation finally having testimony, what other sorts of cases can you present, or cases that you're going to use?
Oh, well, we're gathering information on cases now. We are going to use one of the 9/11 case studies. We are going to talk about the structural assessments in the Berkshires. One case we may not use in our verbal testimony, although we're writing about it, is a situation a few years ago where we had a heavy rain, and the dams in Massachusetts, in certain areas of the state, were in danger of breaking. So in one situation, we have an engineer from an engineering firm who was called by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. We need your help to assess this dam. No contract involved at all. Can you assess this dam and tell us what to do? The engineer came up, did a quick assessment, and said, you have to do a controlled release because this dam is going to breach. If you don't, knowing if you do this controlled release, you're still going to cause some upstream flooding. But if it breaks, it's going to be even worse. The flooding will be even worse. And sure enough, there was some flooding. I believe it flooded part of Route 1 North. It was a north of Boston dam. No suit was filed as a result, but this firm, there was the potential for a suit, and I hope nobody sees this. Who's going to say, oh, I'm going to file a suit in this case?
Oh, but, this brings back the whole time to do the analysis. Not even a computer, a CAD-1 model. I mean, doing a landscape like that, I know because I do a lot of surface and subsurface analysis. The computer needs time to process all the data, to find all your low points, create a systematic where the water exactly is going to go. How can, clearly this person was experienced.
Right.
At least he saw that there was going to be potential, or maybe he knows that's just generally what's likely to happen because of development. That's just what happens now. We've daylighted so much ground, floods occur a lot more than they used to. But this goes back to the time factor. So that is completely addressed in. I mean, is that something you're really going to push?
We are going to push providing this kind of protection. We can't push providing more time to people. It's still going to be assessment work that is done on the fly, literally in these situations. You're in an emergency situation, or you're under a state of emergency. You've got to make some quick decisions.
And it sounds to me the cases we're hearing, this is where someone asks somebody to do something. The untold story is the people that are afraid to step forward in the first place.
Right. Well, I think that over the longer term, if we're able to get this through, and the MIR group that the Boston Society of Civil Engineers and CMAS are working on together, if they're able to provide a trained group and other trained professionals who can step up when MEMA needs a call, it'll be a more organized effort. People will be used to what they have to do to be able to support first responders, and there'll be a more organized way to reach them. I do have to say, after 9/11, we were called in by MEMA at the Engineering Center, and I went in and very quickly gathered information from individuals in all of our associations. I said, are you willing to provide emergency services if needed, if something like this happens again? And at that time, we gave them a CD of people who stepped up and who said that they were willing to provide services. Subsequently, people recognized that you needed to have a certain level of FEMA training and another sort of skill set outside your normal work to be most productive, but they also had to be able to reach you.
We have had MEMA on, and it was very interesting. They talked about some of the things they need to learn how to do aside from what their purpose is. And it was a structural engineer, but they also have to learn how to handle dogs and what to do in case the bomb does go off. I
Right.
mean, there's a lot more to it than just a straight, I'm going to look at this and tell you whether or not it's going to stand up and sit down.
Right.
So you're right. I mean, there is another skill set that's required. I remember for Hurricane Katrina, our company did come through and
Right,
look
ours
for people
too.
willing.
Right.
Right. Well, those are companies that have contracts with FEMA.
Right.
Yeah.
That went, and we work at those companies that have those
Yeah.
contracts. But other than that, there's a lot of people that are members of teams. We've got several of them that are members of the Boston Society of Civil Engineers that are well trained and ready to go, and they're part of official MEMA trained teams that go, but they know that this is a second job. They work their engineering job. When something goes bad, they've got a second job on the team. They leave their work and
And they go to
they
help, right?
go to help.
Right.
Actually, this makes me wonder because when I initially stepped forward, I was under the impression, given my skill set, I would be doing maybe light foundation work or something for a ramp for someone who ended up in a wheelchair. So it's not technically an emergency,
Oh, that's
That's
a
a
different
different-
situation.
but it's still pro bono.
It is pro bono work, but let's, if you want to
Yeah,
talk
we-
about
we
that
might as
topic,
well,
we
yeah.
can. So the Department of Public Safety has formed something called the Boston Survivors Accessibility Alliance. It's separate from this legislation, but related in a bit. This is for marathon bombing survivors who need retrofits to their homes.
Right.
And they have to fill out a certain level of paperwork to indicate what they need. A team is put together, led by an architect, a retired architect who's the project manager for this now, but with an occupational therapist, with other counselors there as well, and then bringing in architectural and engineering help and contractor help when needed to do these kinds of retrofits, whether it's a ramp or something else. Now, again, there are liability issues here, but what we found is for many firms, as long as the firm lets its own insurance company know that it's going to have its employees working on these projects, there is coverage.
Okay, so that's something
We've
that
got- So
it
our
depends on the
organization needs to make
firm.
sure our
And-
members know.
Well, we've got another thing too. We're all members of the American Society. Well, not everybody that's watching the show, but a lot of civil engineers are members of the American Society of Civil Engineers, and if you run it through them,
It's not,
we've
not
done
exactly.
pro bono. We've done some pro bono projects.
Right.
Not that particular one, but we've done redoing playgrounds so that they're handicapped accessible, and projects like that. Doing site civil work for schools and hospital schools and other groups that are state groups that don't necessarily have the funding to get what they want, but there's a need. And the American Society of Civil Engineers, that's another way that we can do pro bono work. is
Right,
to-
right.
covered.
But
And be
for the
covered.
marathon survivors,
That was
ASC can't play in that.
Right.
Play in that playground. So it's,
Right.
in
This
this
is
case,
also
it's got to be through the firm, and the firm has to have professional liability insurance. In fact, we've had to say to some people who have volunteered to help with designing ramps or redesign of certain kinds of structures, unless you have your own professional liability insurance, we can't take a chance and we can't pull you into this because we don't know what the long-term implications of some of these projects will be.
I mean,
But firms are stepping up for
Right.
the projects that we've seen so far.
I mean, not to step away off topic, but this is interesting in another way because a lot of the service learning programs, which are a big part of, or we're trying to make it a big part of a curriculum to become a civil engineer, they take place in other countries. And I was wondering why we don't like places like Detroit, places that
Oh,
have
we-
used. I mean, you
we
could
do
have,
too.
I would have fun making Detroit my own little future city. I would do that for fun.
Actually,
but
if
I
you'll-
won't. I'm gonna hold on that
Even
idea.
Engineers Without Borders, the professional section, they do projects right in Massachusetts. You don't always go overseas.
Oh, see, all the ones that we were offered while I was in college were in
That's
South
because those are the
America.
ones that have the allure, and I know college students want to go on a trip
Oh,
overseas
all
more.
right, so that explains
It gets a
that.
little different when you get to the professional chapter. And they can't travel so
Oh.
much.
Well, because we're actually going to probably be out of time soon. I know usually the show moves a lot faster than I realize. But can you give us some key points that you really want to drive home, and that maybe we can use this show in other towns and municipalities at their local cable companies, so people see this.
Right. Oh, I think that would be terrific. We have a great, vibrant engineering and design professional and contractor community in Massachusetts. It's one of those knowledge sectors that I think sometimes public leaders may not realize that we have here. But during a time of emergency, we have people who are willing to step up and help. And very willing to do that, but they also can't take a chance that they're going to be sued either professionally through their work or personally with their own personal assets as a result of stepping up to volunteer to provide their professional expertise. So knowing that we're facing climate change, knowing that our storms are getting more violent in
Yes.
some ways,
I think
and
you're
knowing
right.
that there are other unknowns, other public safety concerns that may be broader in reach, whether it's a chemical explosion at a plant on the North Shore or an act of terrorism. We need to be prepared, and we need to be a resilient society that can respond,
I so
which
agree.
gets you to the national month.
Yes, USGS, I guess, has this is their safety awareness month. So, I mean, do you know a lot about that, or just go to the website
Just
and they give good hints?
Yeah, just go to the website, but the point is, because it's September, because we're thinking about September 11th,
Storms.
and we're thinking about storms, that people, the public as a whole, has a responsibility to be prepared. Whether it's being prepared personally in your own family for a hurricane or something else, or being prepared to help others around you.
And you know, that really, it struck me that you said, you know, this is to become like a more resilient society, because if you look at Japan, the Fukushima plant, I mean, they stepped forward. Those inspectors stepped forward. And I mean, obviously, they had even more dire consequences than just, you know, lawsuits. But people are, I think in general, they want to help.
Yes.
And it's a shame.
Definitely.
So I think this bill is fantastic.
Me too.
Well, thank
So-
you. We appreciate your support. So we need you to write to your legislators and tell them why this bill is important, and we need our BSCS members to do that as well.
Well,
All right.
So certainly.
So
getting out the
I
word.
know we're coming down to the last minutes, and I have to get certain announcements in before we
Oh.
go.
All right, okay.
So while we're in the final minute, right now school has just begun, and we are already kicked off the Future City competition, but that doesn't mean it's too late to join. You can join until the
Is it in
beginning of
Detroit?
November. The Nationals, it's... the,
This is about
This is about
Detroit.
so they are in Detroit and many other places. But it's right now is the perfect time. Any school, grades 6, 7, 8 can join, even homeschools and after-school clubs like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. Anybody, any group like that can join, and the registration is now open. And if you go to the website www.engineeryourfuture.org,
And it's
you can find that.
transportation?
The theme this year is public transportation systems.
That'd be so
Solving
fun.
the transportation problems of your future city is the main theme for the year. It uses SimCity, the brand new SimCity 5 program within it, and it's very fun. Also, the Model Bridge Contest will be kicking off, which you for a couple of years have run. And
TJ this year.
TJ will be running it this year. And we can't tell you what the materials are, but they will be announced in the third week of October, and it will go up also at engineeryourfuture.org. And at ThinkFest, which will be November 2nd, that's a day, it's like Chuck E. Cheese done engineering style, a day of hands-on activities, and you get points for your activities and go to the prize table at the end of it, and everything we do is free. That is something November 2nd at Merrimack College,
I'll be
usually
going
10
to
in the
that.
morning till 2 in the afternoon.
I'll be there.
And I think that's about it.
I hate to go backwards, but really quickly, this mayor training that you were talking
Oh,
about.
the mayor training.
Can the public go to this?
I don't know what the actual requirements are. I think you
it's
have
for
to be
engineers
an
and
engineer and architect in order to
Registered
do
in
it.
Massachusetts.
Right. I think you actually need your PE or your architectural license.
Right.
We could put a link
But-
up in our website, bsces.org.
Right. If you go to bsces.org, there's definitely
have a
you can link to the. There already is something
You
up
can
there.
check and see if you might want to attend that training. And I just want to thank you a lot, Abby. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I really believe this is good work. We need this, absolutely. And thank you, Reed. We'll see you next month.
Right, see you next month.